A lonely heart's search spanning 15 years, a chance encounter that defied all odds. Tech magnate Ethan Wright never imagined finding Sophie Bennett returning his lost wallet would reunite him with the woman who vanished from his life without a trace. Their worlds couldn't be more different now, his defined by power and wealth, hers by quiet dedication to books and community. But sometimes fate offers second chances to those patient enough to recognize them. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The sleek black Tesla glided to a stop outside the towering glass headquarters of Wright Innovations, dominating the Seattle skyline like a monument to ambition realized. At 42, Ethan Wright had everything a man could want: a multi-billion-dollar tech empire built from nothing, a penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay, and the respect of the entire business world. As he stepped from the car, his custom-tailored Italian suit highlighting his still athletic frame, his mind was already racing through the day's agenda. "Good morning, Mr. Wright," his executive assistant Diana greeted him in the lobby, tablet in hand. "The board is waiting in the conference room, and the quarterly projections look even better than anticipated." Ethan nodded, his expression intense but distracted. "Tell them I'll be up in 10 minutes. I need to review something in my office first." As Diana hurried away, Ethan's phone buzzed with yet another congratulatory message about Wright Innovations' newest AI breakthrough. The company's stock had jumped 15% overnight, adding another billion to his personal wealth. Yet despite the success, a familiar emptiness lingered, the same void he'd carried for 15 years. His private elevator whisked him to the top floor, where his corner office offered panoramic views of the city he now commanded. Ethan set his briefcase down and stood at the window, watching Seattle come alive in the morning light. On days like this, when everything was going perfectly according to plan, the memories seemed to surface most strongly. 15 years. 15 years since Sophie had disappeared from his life without explanation. They had been college sweethearts at Washington State University, he studying computer science on scholarship, she pursuing library sciences with the same quiet passion she brought to everything. They had planned a future together, dreams whispered under starlit skies about the life they would build. Then came the scholarship to MIT's graduate program, his golden ticket. She had encouraged him to go, promising they would make it work despite the distance. 6 months later, her letters stopped coming. Phone calls went unanswered. When he finally managed to return to Pullman during a brief break, her apartment was empty, her friends claiming they didn't know where she'd gone. It was as if Sophie Bennett had simply vanished. Ethan shook himself from the memories and glanced at his watch. The board was waiting. With practiced discipline, he pushed thoughts of Sophie back into their compartment and became once again Ethan Wright, CEO and tech visionary, the man whose facial recognition software and AI advancements had revolutionized industries worldwide. The board meeting proceeded efficiently. Ethan moved through the agenda with his characteristic precision, discussing expansion plans, approving new research initiatives, and reviewing the latest product launches. 2 hours later, as executives filed out, his CFO, Marcus Jensen, lingered behind. "Impressive quarter," Marcus commented, gathering his papers. "But you seem distracted today. Everything all right?" Ethan managed a tight smile. Marcus was more than his CFO. He was one of the few people Ethan considered a friend, having been with the company since its garage startup days. "Just thinking about the Thompson acquisition. There are still some integration issues to work out." Marcus didn't look convinced, but knew better than to push. "By the way, are you attending the charity gala tonight? Perfect opportunity to showcase our new community initiatives." Ethan suppressed a sigh. Another evening of forced smiles and small talk with Seattle's elite. "I'll be there. Have Diana send the car around 8. After Marcus left, Ethan spent the afternoon in back-to-back meetings, his mind focused on the complex problems that had built his empire. This was what he excelled at, seeing patterns others missed, finding solutions where others saw only obstacles. If only personal matters could be solved with the same analytical precision. At 6, with the office emptying for the day, Ethan decided to walk home rather than call his driver. The evening was unusually clear for Seattle, and the 4-mile journey to his penthouse would clear his head before tonight's event. He loosened his tie as he stepped onto the sidewalk. enjoying the momentary anonymity among the evening commuters. 3 blocks into his walk, passing the entrance to Westlake Park, Ethan felt the unmistakable weight missing from his back pocket. His wallet was gone. He patted his other pockets, wondering if he'd placed it elsewhere, then recalled removing it earlier to pay for coffee. Had he left it on his desk? Or worse, had it fallen out somewhere along his walk? Ethan turned back, retracing his steps with growing frustration. The wallet itself wasn't the issue. It contained only a driver's license, a few credit cards easily canceled, and perhaps $300 in cash. But it had been a gift from his grandfather. The worn leather, a reminder of the man who had raised him after his parents' death, who had believed in him before anyone else did. After searching fruitlessly for 20 minutes, Ethan resigned himself to its loss. He would have to call and cancel his cards, get a new license. All inconveniences his assistant could handle tomorrow. The sentimental loss stung more deeply. He continued his walk home, the evening's pleasure diminished. The charity gala now felt like an even greater burden. As he entered his building, the concierge called out to him. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Mr. Wright, there's a package for you. It was hand-delivered about 10 minutes ago. Curious, Ethan accepted the small paper bag. Inside was his wallet, along with a handwritten note on Seattle Public Library stationery. Found this in Westlake Park. Driver's license indicated the owner, and a quick internet search provided your address. Hope this saves you some trouble. S. Bennett, Head Librarian, Seattle Central Branch. Ethan stared at the name, his heart suddenly pounding against his ribs. S. Bennett. Sophie Bennett? Could it possibly be her, after all these years? Here in Seattle? The coincidence seemed too extraordinary to be real. With trembling fingers, he opened the wallet. Everything was intact. Credit cards, cash, even the small photo he kept hidden behind his driver's license. A faded image of 2 college students with their whole lives ahead of them. The charity gala forgotten, Ethan rushed to his computer. A quick search confirmed it. Sophie Bennett was indeed the head librarian at Seattle's Central Library, a position she had held for just over 2 years. There was even a professional photo. Her hair was shorter now, styled in a practical bob rather than the long waves he remembered. But her eyes, those thoughtful hazel eyes, were unmistakably the same. For 15 years he had searched for her intermittently, hiring private investigators during the early years when the pain was still fresh, then gradually accepting that some mysteries might never be solved. And now, through pure chance, she had found him instead. Ethan called Diana immediately. Cancel my appearance at the gala tonight. Family emergency. He ignored her surprised questions. In 10 years, he had never missed a scheduled appearance. Tomorrow he would go to the library and see her face to face. The thought sent equal waves of anticipation and terror through him. What would he say? Would she even want to see him? Had she recognized his name on the driver's license? And most importantly, why had she disappeared all those years ago? Ethan barely slept that night, his mind cycling through scenarios, rehearsing conversations, imagining explanations. By morning, he had convinced himself that she must have had a compelling reason for vanishing from his life, a reason he would finally understand. He dressed with unusual care, selecting a casual button-down shirt and jeans rather than his typical executive attire. He didn't want to intimidate her with the trappings of his success. Then, rejecting both his driver and the Tesla, Ethan hailed a taxi to take him downtown to the Central Library. The Seattle Central Library stood as an architectural marvel, a distinctive diamond-shaped glass and steel structure housing one of the nation's most impressive public collections. Any other day, Ethan might have appreciated the design innovation. Today he noticed only the quickening of his pulse as he approached the entrance. Inside, he asked a young staff member at the information desk for Sophie Bennett. Ms. Bennett is in her office on the 4th floor, but she has meetings all morning, the young woman informed him. Is she expecting you? No, Ethan admitted. But it's important. I can wait. Your name, sir? He hesitated. Ethan. Just tell her Ethan is here. The librarian gave him a curious look but picked up the phone. After a brief exchange, she hung up and pointed toward the elevators. 4th floor. Turn right. Her assistant will meet you." Ethan's heart hammered as the elevator climbed. When the doors opened, a middle-aged woman with wire-rimmed glasses greeted him with professional courtesy. "Mr. Ethan." "Ms. Bennett can spare 5 minutes between meetings. This way, please." She led him down a corridor lined with administrative offices until they reached a door with a simple nameplate. "Sophie Bennett, head librarian." The assistant knocked once, then opened the door. "Your visitor, Miss Bennett." And there she was. Sophie stood behind her desk, sorting through a stack of papers. She looked up, a professional smile already forming on her lips. Then she saw him, and the smile froze. The papers in her hand drifted to the desk as her fingers went slack. "Ethan," she whispered, the color draining from her face. 15 years fell away in an instant. Despite the professional attire, the different hairstyle, the reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, she was still unmistakably his Sophie. The same gentle curves to her face, the same thoughtful eyes that had once looked at him with such love. "Hello, Sophie," he managed, his voice hoarse with emotion. Her assistant glanced between them, sensing the sudden tension. "Should I reschedule your 10:30, Ms. Bennett?" Sophie seemed unable to tear her gaze from Ethan. "Yes, Carol. Please reschedule all my morning appointments." When the door closed behind Carol, silence filled the office. A silence heavy with 15 years of unspoken words. Ethan took a step forward, then stopped, uncertain of his welcome. "Your wallet," Sophie finally said, her voice carefully controlled. "I didn't realize it was you until I saw the driver's license. You've done well for yourself." "Sophie," Ethan began, then faltered. All his rehearsed speeches evaporated. "Why? Why did you disappear? What happened?" She gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. This isn't a conversation to have standing." Ethan sank into the offered chair, watching as Sophie composed herself, her hands clasped tightly before her on the desk. In this moment, the Billionaire CEO felt like that scholarship student again. Uncertain, vulnerable, his heart exposed. "I thought you might have recognized my name when you found the wallet," he said quietly. "I did," she admitted, "but I never expected you to come here in person. I assumed your assistant would send a thank you note, at most." 15 years, Sophie. I searched for you. Hired investigators. No one could find a trace. A flash of something. Pain? Guilt? Crossed her face. "I know. I'm sorry." Sorry? The word felt inadequate against the years of questions, the void she had left. "I deserve an explanation. We were planning a life together, and then you just vanished." Sophie took a deep breath, removing her glasses and setting them carefully on the desk. "It's complicated, Ethan." "I have time," he countered, leaning forward. "All the time in the world for the explanation I've been waiting 15 years to hear." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. "My mother got sick," she finally said. "Early onset Alzheimer's. It happened quickly after you left for MIT. Within months, she couldn't live alone anymore." Ethan felt a pang of sympathy, but confusion remained. "Why didn't you tell me? I would have understood, would have helped." "With what?" Sophie interrupted, a hint of the old fire in her eyes. "You were a scholarship student yourself, barely making ends meet. You had this incredible opportunity at MIT. I wasn't going to burden you with my problems. So you just cut me off? Without a word?" Sophie looked down at her clasped hands. "I tried to write many times. But how do you tell someone you love that your life is falling apart? That you've had to drop out of college to care for your mother? That your dreams are on hold indefinitely?" She looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "You would have come back, given up MIT, sacrificed everything you were working toward." "That should have been my choice to make," Ethan said, unable to keep the hurt from his voice. "Maybe," she conceded. "But I couldn't bear to be the reason you gave up your future. So I made the choice I thought was right, for both of us." The explanation hung between them, logical yet devastating in its simplicity. Ethan struggled to process it, to reconcile the years of uncertainty with this straightforward answer. "What happened after? With your mother?" Sophie's expression softened with old grief. I cared for her for 8 years. Worked whatever jobs I could find that allowed flexible hours. When she passed, I went back to school, finished my degree, worked my way up through the library system. All alone, Ethan said quietly. It wasn't a question. Yes. A simple answer that conveyed years of struggle. Ethan leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. When I made my first $1 million, I hired another investigator to find you. When I hit $1 billion, I tried again. Every major milestone, I looked for you. He gave a hollow laugh. And all it took in the end was a lost wallet. Something in his words seemed to affect her deeply. Sophie stood abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked the bustling downtown street below. And what would you have done if you'd found me earlier, Ethan? 5 years ago? 10? Your world is so different from mine now. Ethan joined her at the window, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Different worlds don't mean we're different people. The Ethan who loved Sophie at Washington State is still here. He tapped his chest, underneath the suits and the board meetings. Sophie turned to face him, her expression guarded. And the Sophie you knew is gone. I had to become someone else. Someone stronger, more practical, less idealistic. I'd like to meet that Sophie, Ethan said gently. If she'd give me the chance. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Carol's voice came through. Ms. Bennett, your 11 o'clock can't be rescheduled. The City Budget Committee. Sophie closed her eyes briefly, then called back. 5 minutes, Carol. Turning to Ethan, she said, I have responsibilities I can't step away from. Ethan nodded, understanding all too well the weight of obligations. Have dinner with me, he said impulsively. Tonight. Just to talk. He saw the hesitation in her eyes, the mental calculation of risks and possibilities. Finally, she reached for a notepad, wrote something quickly, and handed it to him. My address. 7 o'clock. Nothing fancy, please. Relief and joy surged through him. I'll be there. As Ethan left the library, stepping into the bright Seattle day, he felt lighter than he had in years. Questions remained, wounds still needed healing, but for the first time in 15 years he had found Sophie Bennett. And this time, he wouldn't let her disappear again. What neither of them realized as they parted was that, across town, in the sleek boardroom of Wright Innovations, Marcus Jensen was receiving an interesting report from the company's security team, a report detailing Ethan's unexpected visit to the Seattle Central Library and his prolonged meeting with its head librarian. Marcus's brow furrowed as he studied the information. Ethan's personal life had always been strictly private, but as CFO and friend, Marcus had long been concerned about anything that might destabilize the company's leadership. With a thoughtful expression, Marcus picked up his phone and dialed a number. I need everything you can find on Sophie Bennett, head librarian at Seattle Central, he instructed. And I need it by this afternoon. The wheels were in motion. As Ethan contemplated reconnecting with his past, forces within his carefully constructed present were already mobilizing. Forces that viewed sentiment as weakness and personal happiness as secondary to corporate interests. The stage was being set for a collision between two worlds that had never been meant to intersect. Ethan paced his penthouse living room, checking his watch for the third time in as many minutes. It was only 6:15, still 45 minutes before he was due at Sophie's. After 15 years of absence, he was acutely aware of each passing minute, each second bringing him closer to her again. He had changed outfits twice already, finally settling on dark jeans and a simple blue button-down clothes that reflected the Ethan from before, not the billionaire CEO whose face graced business magazines. No driver tonight, no sleek Tesla. He would take a rideshare like any normal person going to dinner. His phone rang, Marcus calling for the second time that evening. Ethan let it go to voicemail. Whatever business matter it was could wait until tomorrow. Tonight belonged to the past. To second chances. To questions that had haunted him for 15 years. The address Sophie had given him led to a modest apartment building in Fremont, one of Seattle's more bohemian neighborhoods. The 6-story brick structure was well-maintained but unpretentious, worlds away from Ethan's luxury high-rise downtown. As he approached the entrance, a young couple exited, holding the door for him with casual friendliness. Apartment 412. Ethan stood before Sophie's door, feeling strangely nervous. He who negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. Before he could knock, The door opened. "I saw you from the window," Sophie explained, stepping back to let him enter. She had changed from her professional attire into jeans and a soft green sweater that brought out the flecks of emerald in her hazel eyes. Her apartment was exactly as Ethan might have imagined. Walls lined with bookshelves, comfortable furniture that invited reading, framed botanical prints adding splashes of color. It was modest but warm, reflecting a life built around intellectual pursuits rather than material display. "I brought wine," Ethan said, holding up a bottle he'd selected with care. Nothing ostentatious, a good Oregon Pinot Noir that wouldn't overwhelm the gesture with its price tag. "Thank you." Sophie accepted it with a small smile. "Dinner's almost ready. Nothing elaborate, I'm afraid. Just pasta." The normality of the moment struck Ethan with unexpected force. How many times had he imagined this? A simple evening with Sophie, talking over dinner in a comfortable space. The fantasy had sustained him through lonely nights in his empty penthouse, through meaningless dates with women who wanted the billionaire, not the man. "It smells wonderful," he said, following her to the small but efficient kitchen where pots simmered on the stove. Sophie poured the wine while Ethan, after a moment's hesitation, asked if he could help. She handed him plates and cutlery to set the table, a domestic task he hadn't performed in years, not since his personal chef and housekeeper had taken over such mundane details of his life. They sat at her small dining table, the initial awkwardness gradually easing as they shared the simple meal. Conversation flowed more naturally now, away from the formality of her office, though they both carefully avoided the deepest questions that hung between them. Sophie told him about her work at the library, her passion for making information accessible to everyone, particularly underprivileged communities. "Libraries are one of the last truly democratic spaces," she explained, her eyes lighting up with conviction. "A place where anyone, regardless of their circumstances, can access knowledge, connection, opportunity." Ethan found himself enchanted by her dedication, recognizing the same passionate intelligence that had drawn him to her in college. "You always wanted to make a difference," he observed. "I remember you talking about literacy programs even back then." A shadow crossed her face. "Dreams get deferred, but sometimes they find a way back." "Tell me about your mother," Ethan said gently. "What happened after I left for MIT?" Sophie was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in her glass. It started with little things, forgetting where she put her keys, missing appointments. "I thought it was just stress." Then one day the police called. They'd found her wandering 3 miles from home, unable to remember her address. Her voice grew softer. The diagnosis came a week later. Early onset Alzheimer's. She was only 52. "And you dropped everything to care for her." Sophie nodded. "What choice did I have?" She had no one else. The disease progressed quickly. Within a year, she needed constant supervision. "That's why the letters stopped," Ethan said, pieces finally falling into place. "At first, I tried to manage everything. Part-time classes, a job, her care. But it was impossible. Something had to give." She met his eyes directly. "I made the decision not to burden you with it all. You were just beginning your graduate work, excited about your research. Your letters were full of breakthroughs and possibilities." "You should have told me," Ethan insisted, the old hurt resurfacing. "I would have found a way to help." "With what resources, Ethan? You were a scholarship student living on ramen noodles. And I knew you. You would have left MIT, given up everything to help us. I couldn't let you sacrifice your future that way." The painful logic of her decision hung between them. Ethan wanted to argue, to insist that he should have been given the choice, but he recognized the fierce protectiveness that had driven her actions. It was the same Sophie who had once stayed up all night helping him prepare for a crucial exam, who had always put others' needs before her own. "What about after?" he asked quietly. "When your mother passed, why didn't you try to find me then?" Sophie stood, carrying their empty plates to the kitchen. When she returned, her expression was carefully composed. "By then, you were Ethan Wright, tech wunderkind. I saw your first company featured in a technology magazine while I was finishing my degree. You were already becoming successful, building your life." She shrugged slightly. It seemed too late to reappear and complicate things. "Too late," Ethan repeated, the words bitter on his tongue. All those years, searching for you, wondering what happened, and you thought it was too late. What would you have had me do? A flash of the old fire sparked in her eyes. Show up at your office? Hello, remember me, the girlfriend who disappeared? I'm back now, my mother's dead, and I'm struggling through community college courses at night while working at a public library during the day. How would that have fit into your rising star narrative? The hurt in her voice struck him deeply. Is that what you think of me? That I would have cared about appearances? About how your struggles might have affected my, quote, narrative? Sophie's anger deflated as quickly as it had flared. No, she admitted quietly. But people change, Ethan. The boy I knew became a different man. I became a different woman. We can't pretend the years didn't happen. Ethan stood, moving to the window that overlooked the quiet street below. Night had fallen completely now, the neighborhood lights creating a softer, more intimate version of the city skyline he usually observed from his penthouse. The night before I left for MIT, he said, his back still to her. We sat on the roof of your apartment building, looking at the stars. Do you remember what you said to me? He heard her soft intake of breath. I said that no matter how far apart we were, we'd be looking at the same sky. Ethan turned to face her. For 15 years, Sophie, I've looked up at the night sky and wondered where you were, if you were seeing the same stars. Even when logic told me to move on, something in me couldn't let go of you. The vulnerability in his confession hung in the air between them. Sophie's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Ethan. A sharp knock at the door interrupted whatever she had been about to say. Sophie frowned, checking her watch. I'm not expecting anyone. When she opened the door, a tall, imposing man in an expensive suit stood in the hallway. Ethan recognized him immediately. Marcus? He said, moving forward. What are you doing here? Marcus Jensen stepped into the apartment without waiting for an invitation, his sharp eyes taking in the modest surroundings before settling on Sophie with calculated assessment. I apologize for the interruption, he said smoothly, though his expression suggested no actual regret. But there's an urgent matter that requires your immediate attention, Ethan. The Nakamura deal. There's been a complication. Ethan frowned. It can wait until morning. I'm in the middle of something important. I'm afraid it can't wait, Marcus insisted, his tone hardening slightly. The Tokyo markets open in a few hours. Decisions need to be made now. Sophie had moved back, watching the exchange with a carefully neutral expression that didn't quite hide her discomfort. You should go, she told Ethan. It sounds important. It can wait, Ethan repeated firmly, irritated by Marcus's intrusion and suspicious of its timing. The Nakamura deal was proceeding smoothly. Any issues could certainly have been handled with a phone call. Marcus pulled out his phone, showing Ethan a series of urgent-looking emails. At least step outside to take this call. 5 minutes. Reluctantly, Ethan turned to Sophie. I'll be right back. In the hallway outside her apartment, Ethan rounded on his CFO. What is this really about, Marcus? The Nakamura deal is fine. Marcus's professional demeanor slipped, revealing genuine concern. What are you doing, Ethan? This woman disappears from your life for 15 years. Then suddenly reappears just as we're about to announce the biggest expansion in company history? She didn't suddenly reappear. She found my wallet and returned it. It was coincidence. There are no coincidences in our world, Marcus countered. Have you considered this might be calculated? That perhaps Ms. Bennett has been watching your success from afar, waiting for the right moment to insert herself back into your life? Ethan felt a surge of anger. You've been having her investigated. It's my job to protect you and the company. This woman, her name is Sophie. Fine. Sophie has a history of financial instability, significant medical debts from her mother's care, a modest salary that barely covers her student loans, and suddenly she's reconnected with one of the wealthiest men in tech. You don't find the timing suspicious? Ethan's jaw tightened. You're out of line, Marcus. Am I? Or am I the only one thinking clearly? You've built something extraordinary, Ethan. Wright Innovations is poised to revolutionize AI integration across multiple industries. The contracts we're negotiating will change the face of technology for the next decade. And right at this crucial moment, you're distracted by sentimentality over a college girlfriend? This isn't about the company. It's personal. Nothing is purely personal when you're in your position, Marcus insisted. Everything you do affects thousands of employees, millions in shareholder value. Your personal choices have consequences far beyond yourself. The words hit uncomfortably close to the same arguments Sophie had made years ago, that her personal struggles might have derailed his future. Now Marcus was suggesting that his personal happiness might threaten the company's trajectory. I appreciate your concern, Ethan said, his voice cooling to the tone he used in difficult negotiations. But my personal life is not subject to company approval. Now, if there's nothing actually urgent about the Nakamura deal, I'd like to return to my dinner. Marcus studied him for a long moment, then sighed. Just be careful, Ethan. I've seen what happens when emotion clouds judgment. Do your diligence before you let this woman back into your life. He handed Ethan a slim folder. Read this. Then decide if I'm being paranoid. Before Ethan could refuse it, Marcus turned and walked toward the elevator, leaving him standing in the hallway with the folder in his hands. Inside Sophie's apartment, an uncomfortable silence had fallen. She stood by the bookshelf, arms crossed defensively across her chest. I'm sorry about that, Ethan said, setting the unopened folder on a side table. Your CFO doesn't approve of your dining choices, Sophie observed, her attempt at lightness falling flat. Marcus is overly protective. He's been with me since the beginning, seen all the people who've tried to get close to me for the wrong reasons. And he thinks I'm one of them. It wasn't a question. Ethan moved closer to her. It doesn't matter what he thinks. Doesn't it? Sophie's gaze fell on the folder he'd brought in. What's that? Ethan hesitated. Nothing important. Don't lie to me. The quiet intensity in her voice stopped him. After 15 years, at least give me the dignity of honesty. Reluctantly, Ethan explained. Marcus had you investigated. That folder probably contains everything from your credit score to what you had for breakfast last Tuesday. To his surprise, Sophie laughed. A short, bitter sound without humor. Of course he did. And what terrible secrets did he uncover? That I'm a public servant with student loan debt? That I live paycheck to paycheck in a rental apartment while you own half of downtown Seattle? Sophie. No, let's be honest with each other, finally. She paced the small living room, energy radiating from her slender frame. Your friend is right to be suspicious. Look at us, Ethan. Look at these two different worlds. You run a tech empire. I run community literacy programs. You have board meetings about billion-dollar acquisitions. I have meetings about budget cuts to public services. She gestured around her modest apartment. This is my reality. It's a good life, a meaningful one, but it's worlds away from yours. Ethan felt the gap between them widening with each word. Material differences don't matter. We're still the same people underneath. Are we? Sophie challenged. The boy who left for MIT died the same day I committed to caring for my mother. We both had to become different people to survive what came next. Her voice softened. You became a visionary who built something extraordinary. I became someone who learned to find meaning in small victories, day by day. Why are you pushing me away? Ethan asked, frustration rising. We've found each other again against impossible odds. Doesn't that mean something? Sophie's expression grew sad. It means we have a chance for closure, for healing old wounds, but maybe that's all it means. The words struck him like a physical blow. You can't believe that. I don't know what to believe, she admitted, vulnerability breaking through her composed exterior. 15 years is a long time, Ethan. We can't just pick up where we left off and pretend nothing changed. The truth of her words hung between them. Ethan wanted to argue, to insist that their connection transcended time and circumstance. But the reality of their different lives was undeniable. Marcus's intrusion had made the contrast painfully clear. I should go, he said finally. Sophie nodded, though something like regret flickered in her eyes. Maybe that's best. At the door, Ethan turned back to her. For what it's worth, I don't care about the differences between our worlds. I never did. What I cared about, what I still care about, is you. Sophie's composure wavered for a moment. Good night, Ethan. He left without the closure he had sought. The questions that had haunted him for 15 years only partially answered. As he stepped into the cool night air, Ethan realized he had left Marcus's folder on Sophie's side table, the dossier detailing all the practical reasons why reconnecting with her was a mistake. Somehow, leaving it behind felt right. Whatever decision he made about Sophie would be based on his feelings, not on balance sheets and background checks. Back in her apartment, Sophie stood motionless for several minutes after Ethan's departure. Then, with trembling hands, she reached for the folder he had left behind. She hesitated only briefly before opening it. Steeling herself to see her life reduced to financial statistics and clinical assessments, the pages confirmed what she already knew. Her precarious financial situation laid bare in credit reports and salary information. But it was the last page that caught her breath, a photograph taken 15 years ago. Sophie, much younger, sitting beside a hospital bed, holding the hand of a woman whose once familiar features had been distorted by illness. Her mother. Below the photo was a note. Subject assumed full-time care of mother following Alzheimer's diagnosis. Sacrificed educational opportunities and career advancement. Demonstrates exceptional loyalty and integrity under difficult circumstances. Tears blurred Sophie's vision. The clinical language couldn't disguise the human reality it described. The years of exhaustion, heartbreak, and loneliness she had endured. Years that had transformed her from an idealistic college student into the woman she now was. Slowly, she closed the folder. Marcus Jensen had meant to warn Ethan away from her, to highlight the practical incompatibility of their worlds. But perhaps he had inadvertently revealed something else, the character that had been forged through her struggles, the strength Ethan had always seen in her, even before she recognized it in herself. Across town, in his penthouse, overlooking the glittering city, Ethan stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, remembering a night 15 years ago when two young lovers had looked up at the stars and promised to remember they shared the same sky. The memory felt both achingly distant and immediately present, a paradox that mirrored his feelings for Sophie, a connection that had somehow survived 15 years of silence, only to face new challenges in their reunited present. His phone chimed with an incoming message. Marcus, sending a digital copy of the folder Ethan had accidentally left behind. Delete without reading, or open and arm himself with practical reasons to protect his heart? The question remained unanswered as Ethan continued to gaze at the night sky, wondering if somewhere in her modest apartment, Sophie might be looking up at the same stars. Neither of them could know that the morning would bring new complications. Complications that would force them to confront not just their past and present, but the possibility of a shared future neither had dared to imagine. In her office at the Seattle Central Library the next morning, Sophie was reviewing the quarterly budget when her assistant Carol knocked tentatively on the door. "Ms. Bennett? There's a Mr. Jensen here to see you. He says it's urgent." Sophie's heart sank. Marcus Jensen, Ethan's protective CFO, the man who had compiled that folder detailing her financial struggles and personal history. What could he possibly want with her now? "Send him in," she said, straightening her posture and composing her features into professional neutrality. Marcus entered with the confident stride of a man accustomed to commanding rooms much larger and more impressive than her modest office. He declined her offer to sit, preferring to stand with calculated intimidation. "Ms. Bennett, I'll be direct. Your reappearance in Ethan's life is ill-timed and potentially problematic." Sophie maintained her calm demeanor. "Mr. Jensen, my reappearance was purely coincidental. I found a wallet and returned it to its owner." "Perhaps," he conceded with a skeptical lift of his eyebrow. "But your continued involvement with him threatens to derail critical business initiatives at a pivotal moment for Wright Innovations." "My involvement, as you call it, consists of one dinner that you interrupted," Sophie pointed out. "Hardly a threat to your corporate empire." Marcus's expression hardened. "Ethan isn't himself when it comes to you. For 15 years, you've been his blind spot. The mystery he couldn't solve, the past he couldn't reconcile. Now that you're back, he's distracted, emotional, making decisions based on sentiment rather than strategy. And why are you telling me this? Shouldn't you be having this conversation with Ethan?" Because I think you're reasonable, Marcus replied, his tone softening slightly. The folder I compiled tells me you're practical, responsible, someone who understands sacrifice for the greater good. You gave up your own dreams once to protect your mother. I'm asking you to consider what's best for Ethan now. The parallel struck Sophie with uncomfortable force. Once before, she had made a unilateral decision to remove herself from Ethan's life, believing it was for his benefit. Was history repeating itself through Marcus's manipulations? What exactly are you asking me to do? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Step back. Give him space to focus on what he's built, what he's responsible for. Wright Innovations employs thousands of people, Ms. Bennett. Our technologies improve millions of lives. That legacy requires Ethan's full attention. Sophie stood, her patience exhausted. Mr. Jensen, 15 years ago, I made a choice I believed was right. To spare Ethan from my burdens. I've lived with the consequences of that decision every day since. I won't make the same mistake again by letting someone else dictate what's best for him. So you'll selfishly pull him away from his responsibilities? From everything he's worked for? No, Sophie said firmly. I'll respect him enough to let him make his own choices, something I failed to do before. Now, I have a budget meeting to prepare for. Please see yourself out. After Marcus left, Sophie sat at her desk, hands trembling slightly from the confrontation. The parallels to her past decision were undeniable, raising uncomfortable questions about her choices then and now. Had she really protected Ethan by disappearing, or had she simply protected herself from vulnerability, from the possibility of becoming a burden? And now, with the vast differences in their circumstances, was reconnecting truly possible? Or was Marcus right? Would she inevitably become a distraction from the important work Ethan had committed himself to? Questions without easy answers swirled in her mind as she tried to focus on budget spreadsheets that suddenly seemed trivial compared to the emotional complexities she faced. 3 days passed without contact between Ethan and Sophie. For Ethan, they were days of intense internal conflict. Hours spent in board meetings and product development sessions where his body was present, but his mind continually drifted to Sophie's modest apartment, to the questions still unanswered between them. The Wright Innovations headquarters buzzed with the usual activity, but to Ethan, everything felt hollow, devoid of the meaning it had held just a week ago. Marcus had been watching him carefully, a mixture of concern and calculation in his gaze. The unspoken tension between them remained, both men aware of Marcus's interference but neither willing to directly address it. Late Thursday afternoon, as rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, Ethan made a decision. He picked up his phone and called Sophie's office at the library. Seattle Central Library, head librarian's office, her assistant answered. This is Ethan Wright. I'd like to speak with Ms. Bennett, please. I'm sorry, Mr. Wright. Ms. Bennett is at the Rainier Valley branch today for community outreach. She won't be back in the main office until tomorrow. Ethan thanked her and hung up, an idea forming. He canceled his remaining meetings and left the building, ignoring Marcus's questioning look as he passed the CFO in the lobby. The Rainier Valley Branch Library was located in one of Seattle's more diverse neighborhoods, an area that had experienced both the challenges of economic hardship and the complications of gentrification. The modest building stood as a community anchor, its warm lights glowing invitingly against the gray afternoon. Ethan parked his car. He'd chosen to drive himself today rather than take his usual driver, and sat watching the entrance for a moment. What was he doing here? The Sophie he had reconnected with would likely be uncomfortable with this unannounced appearance, this intrusion into her professional space. Yet something drove him forward, a need to see her in her element, to understand the life she had built in his absence. Inside, the library hummed with quiet activity. Children sat cross-legged in a reading nook, while a volunteer led a story hour. Teenagers huddled around computers, working on homework or gaming together. Adults browsed shelves or worked at tables, the space serving as an extension of living rooms many might not have. Ethan approached the information desk, where a young librarian greeted him with a smile. "Can I help you find something?" "I'm looking for Sophie Bennett. I understand she's here today." The librarian brightened. "Ms. Bennett is in the community room, running the job skills workshop. Down that hallway, last door on the right." Ethan thanked her and followed the directions, slowing as he approached the open doorway. Inside, Sophie stood before a group of about 15 adults of varying ages, all focused intently on her presentation. She wore simple black slacks and a burgundy sweater, her hair pulled back in a practical style, reading glasses perched on her nose as she gestured to a projection screen. "Remember, your resume is more than just a list of previous jobs," she was saying, her voice warm but authoritative. "It's the story of your professional journey. Even gaps in employment can be framed positively if you highlight the skills you developed during those periods." Ethan leaned against the doorframe, watching unnoticed as Sophie moved among the participants, looking at their draft resumes, offering personalized advice with genuine interest and encouragement. This was a side of her he had never seen. The professional Sophie, confident in her expertise, making a tangible difference in people's lives. One woman, perhaps in her 50s, raised her hand. "But what if the gap was because I was caring for a sick relative? How do I explain that without seeming unreliable?" Something flickered across Sophie's face, a momentary shadow of personal recognition, before she answered with gentle conviction. "Caregiving requires extraordinary skills: organization, time management, emotional resilience, problem-solving under pressure. Those are valuable qualities any employer would be fortunate to have. We'll work on how to articulate that experience as an asset, not a liability." The woman nodded gratefully, visibly relieved. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest, understanding now on a deeper level what Sophie herself had lived through. Not just the sacrifice of caring for her mother, but the challenge of rebuilding her life afterward, of translating that experience into a path forward. As the workshop concluded, participants gathered their materials, several stopping to thank Sophie personally before leaving. Ethan remained in the doorway, suddenly uncertain about his impulsive visit. Sophie was so clearly in her element here, making a difference in a way that had nothing to do with billion-dollar valuations or cutting-edge technology. She noticed him as the last participant left, her expression shifting from surprise to guarded caution. "Ethan, what are you doing here? I called your office. They said you were here." He stepped into the now empty room. "I wanted to see you." Sophie began gathering her materials, her movements deliberate. "You could have called my cell. Would you have answered?" The question hung between them. Sophie paused, then sighed. "Probably not. I needed time to think." "And have you?" "Thought about us, I mean." "There isn't an us, Ethan. There's you. Successful tech visionary with global influence. And there's me, public librarian trying to help people build better lives one resume at a time." She gestured around the modest community room. "This is my world. It's important work, but it's a universe away from yours." Ethan moved closer, helping her gather the printed handouts scattered across the table. "What I just witnessed was remarkable, Sophie. You changed lives today. You gave people hope, practical tools, dignity." He met her eyes directly. "That's not a different universe from mine. It's just a different approach to making an impact." Something in his sincere admiration seemed to catch her off guard. Sophie's professional demeanor softened slightly. "Why are you really here, Ethan?" "Because I've spent 15 years building a company that's changed how technology serves humanity. But I've missed the human connection that gives it all meaning." He took a deep breath. "Because I think we were given a second chance when you found my wallet, and I'm afraid we're about to waste it." Sophie leaned against the table, studying him thoughtfully. "Your CFO came to see me," she said finally. Ethan's expression darkened. Marcus had no right. Actually, he did exactly what a good CFO should do, protected the company's interests. Which, in this case, means protecting you from distractions. Her voice held no bitterness, just pragmatic acceptance. "He's not wrong about the differences in our lives, Ethan. Differences don't matter if the core connection is strong enough." "Don't they?" Sophie challenged gently. "You live in a world of board meetings and investment strategies. I live in one of budget cuts and community grants. You make decisions that affect global markets. I help people write resumes and access information they can't afford otherwise." "And why can't both those worlds exist together?" Ethan countered. "Why does it have to be either/or?" Before Sophie could answer, her phone chimed with a message. She checked it, her expression shifting to concern. "I need to get back to the main branch. There's an issue with the quarterly budget allocation." "Let me drive you," Ethan offered. When she hesitated, he added, "Just a ride, Sophie. No pressure for anything more." After a moment's consideration, she nodded. "All right. Thank you." As they drove through the rain-slicked streets of Seattle, a more comfortable silence developed between them. Sophie gazed out at the passing neighborhoods, each with its own character, its own story. "I love this city," she said softly. "All its contradictions, its blend of natural beauty and urban energy. Even in the rain, especially in the rain, it feels alive with possibility." Ethan glanced at her, struck by how this simple observation revealed the Sophie he had always known, the one who found beauty and meaning in ordinary moments, who saw the world with both clear-eyed realism and persistent hope. "I've always been too busy building my company to really experience Seattle," he admitted. "I live here, but I don't know if I've ever truly seen it the way you do." Sophie turned to him, something softening in her expression. "That's the difference between us, Ethan. You've been focused on creating the future. I've learned to find meaning in the present, in small moments, in helping one person at a time. Maybe I need more of that perspective," he said quietly. "And maybe you could use a little more of mine, the vision to build something larger than the moment." For the first time since their reunion, a genuine smile curved Sophie's lips. "Are you suggesting we might actually complement each other? Is that so hard to imagine?" The question lingered between them as Ethan pulled up to the Central Library's imposing glass structure. Before getting out, Sophie turned to him with sudden decision in her eyes. "There's a community fundraiser tomorrow night for literacy programs across the city. Nothing fancy, just a local restaurant, some music, a silent auction." She hesitated, then continued. "Would you like to come? See more of my world?" Ethan felt a surge of hope. "I'd like that very much." 7 o'clock. Rosita's Cafe in Ballard. Casual dress. With that, she slipped out of the car and hurried into the library, leaving Ethan with the first real sense of possibility he'd felt since their interrupted dinner. When Ethan returned to Wright Innovations, Marcus was waiting in his office, a stack of documents requiring immediate attention spread across the conference table. The CFO's expression was carefully neutral as Ethan entered, but tension radiated from his rigid posture. "The Tokyo team needs these approvals by morning," Marcus said without preamble. "And the board is requesting an update on the AI ethics protocols before the investor call next week." Ethan nodded, removing his rain-dampened jacket. "I'll review everything tonight." Marcus studied him for a moment. "You went to see her." It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. "Yes, and I learned you took it upon yourself to visit her as well. I did what was necessary to protect. To protect me? Or to protect your vision of what Wright Innovations should be?" Ethan interrupted, a rare edge in his voice. "You overstepped, Marcus. The CFO didn't back down. You built this company from nothing, Ethan. 15 years of relentless work, brilliant innovation, perfect strategic execution. Now we're weeks away from the biggest product launch in our history, and suddenly you're distracted by a woman who abandoned you once already." "She didn't abandon me," Ethan corrected, the pieces of Sophie's story now clear to him. "She made an impossible choice. Her mother's care or our relationship. She chose family responsibility over personal happiness. That's hardly abandonment. And now? What's her excuse for the years of silence after her mother died? For not reaching out when she moved to Seattle? To your city?" Marcus pressed. "She saw your success and stayed away until chance put your wallet in her hands. Doesn't that tell you something?" The questions hit uncomfortably close to doubts Ethan himself had harbored. Why hadn't Sophie reached out once she was free of her caregiver responsibilities? Why had she kept her distance even after moving to Seattle? "People make complicated choices for complicated reasons," Ethan said finally. "I'm not looking for perfect explanations, Marcus. I'm looking for a chance to reconnect with someone who once meant everything to me, who might mean everything again." Marcus sighed, his expression softening to genuine concern. Just be careful. Watch for the signs that this is about your wallet, not your heart. He gestured to the documents. The company needs you focused. Thousands of people depend on your vision. I know my responsibilities, Ethan assured him. But a life of all work and no personal connection isn't sustainable. Even visionaries need something to come home to. After Marcus left, Ethan stood at his office window, watching evening descend on Seattle. Somewhere in this same city, Sophie was probably working late at the library, her dedication to public service as intense as his commitment to technological innovation. Two different worlds, two different approaches to making a difference, yet perhaps, as he had suggested to her, complementary rather than contradictory. Tomorrow night's fundraisers would be his first real glimpse into Sophie's community, the world she had built while he was creating his empire of algorithms and semiconductors. Ethan found himself unexpectedly nervous, more concerned about fitting into her environment than he had been about any high-stakes business negotiation in years. The following evening, Ethan arrived at Rosita's cafe 15 minutes early, having deliberated longer than he cared to admit over what constituted casual dress for a community fundraiser. He had finally settled on dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, clothes that wouldn't mark him immediately as a billionaire, but were still respectful of the occasion. Rosita's was a family-owned restaurant that had clearly opened its space for the evening's event. Colorful paper lanterns hung from the ceiling. Tables had been pushed to the edges to create an open area in the center, and a small stage held a trio of musicians playing soft jazz. A table near the entrance displayed items for the silent auction: gift baskets, artwork by local artists, gift certificates to neighborhood businesses. Ethan felt immediately out of his element. At the charity galas he typically attended, minimum donations started at 5 figures, artwork was from recognized galleries, and corporate sponsors competed for recognition. This grassroots fundraiser represented a different approach entirely. Community supporting community, modest contributions pooled toward a common goal. Ethan, you came. He turned to find Sophie approaching, radiant in a simple blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. The genuine pleasure in her voice eased his uncertainty. I said I would, he replied, smiling. It looks wonderful. It's not quite the Met Gala, she acknowledged with a touch of self-deprecation, but we usually raise enough to fund the children's literacy program for a year. That's what matters, Ethan said sincerely. Results, not fancy packaging. Sophie's expression warmed at his understanding. Let me introduce you to some people. What followed was a revelation for Ethan. Sophie led him through the crowded room, introducing him simply as my friend Ethan, with no mention of Wright Innovations or his professional status. He met library volunteers, local teachers, small business owners who donated to the silent auction, parents whose children had benefited from literacy programs, a cross-section of community members united by their belief in education and equal access to information. Most refreshing was that no one seemed to recognize him as Ethan Wright, tech billionaire. Here, he was just Sophie's friend, judged on his conversation and genuine interest rather than his net worth or business acumen. It was liberating in a way he hadn't experienced in years. This is incredible, he told Sophie as they found a quiet moment between introductions. Everyone here is so passionate about the programs. They see the direct impact, Sophie explained. When a child who's struggling suddenly connects with reading, when an adult learns digital literacy skills that lead to a better job, these aren't abstract metrics. They're visible transformations in real people's lives. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. At Wright Innovations, we talk about changing the world through technology, but sometimes the actual humans using our products seem distant, theoretical rather than real. That's the nature of scale, Sophie said without judgment. You're reaching millions globally. We're reaching dozens locally. Both approaches matter. Before he could respond, a woman approached them with obvious excitement. Sophie, we just got a matching grant from the Neighborhood Business Association. They'll double whatever we raise tonight up to $10,000. Sophie's face lit up. That's wonderful, Maria. With that, we might be able to expand the after-school program to the Beacon Hill branch too. As Maria hurried off to share the news, Ethan watched the calculations visibly running through Sophie's mind. What $10,000 could accomplish, how to allocate limited resources for maximum impact. It was the same strategic thinking he applied to business decisions, just at a different scale and with different metrics. 10,000 would be transformative, Sophie explained, noticing his observation. It means another neighborhood gets programming. Dozens more children receive support. Ethan nodded, a thought forming. What would 20,000 do? Sophie blinked. Double that impact, obviously. But the business association capped their matching at 10. What if someone else matched the second 10? Understanding dawned in Sophie's eyes. Ethan, you don't have to. I want to, he said simply. Not as a grand gesture, not to impress you, but because I believe in what you're doing here, because it matters. Something shifted in Sophie's expression, a warming, a softening that went beyond professional gratitude. You'd have to talk to Maria about the details. We have a donation process. Of course, I'll follow the proper channels. He smiled. I'm learning how your world works, remember? Later, as the evening wound down and the silent auction winners were being announced, Sophie and Ethan found themselves in a quiet corner of the restaurant. The fundraiser had exceeded expectations even before Ethan's matching offer, the community's generosity proving greater than anticipated. Thank you for inviting me, Ethan said softly. I've attended hundreds of fundraisers, but none quite like this. Better or worse? Sophie asked with a hint of teasing. Different. More connected to the actual work being done. More human. Sophie studied him, her expression thoughtful. And did it change how you see my world? This modest corner of Seattle that's so far from the corporate headquarters and technology campuses? It helped me understand something important, Ethan admitted. The work you do. It's not smaller than mine, just more focused, more immediate. You see the direct impact of every dollar, every hour invested. There's a beauty in that I've lost touch with. Sophie's eyes softened. And your work has scale mine could never achieve. One algorithm can improve millions of lives simultaneously. There's power in that, too. They stood in companionable silence, watching as community members said their goodbyes, the evening's success evident in their satisfied expressions. The gap between their worlds seemed less insurmountable now, the differences less defining than the shared values beneath them. Would you like to walk for a while? Ethan suggested as the last guests began to leave. The rain has stopped, and Ballard is beautiful at night. Sophie hesitated only briefly before nodding. I'd like that. They strolled through the quiet neighborhood streets, past small shops closed for the night, local restaurants still glowing with activity, historic buildings repurposed for modern life while maintaining their character. Their conversation flowed more easily now, moving beyond the careful negotiations of their earlier encounters to something more genuine, more reminiscent of the connection they had once shared. I've been thinking about what you asked, Sophie said as they paused on a pedestrian bridge overlooking the canal. About why I never reached out after my mother died. Or when I moved to Seattle. Ethan turned to her, silhouetted against the city lights reflecting on the water. You don't owe me explanations. Maybe not. But I owe myself the honesty. She looked out at the water, gathering her thoughts. After Mom died, I was hollow, exhausted beyond anything I can describe. 8 years of watching someone you love disappear piece by piece. It changes you. I needed to rebuild myself before I could consider rebuilding any relationship. Ethan listened, understanding more deeply now the toll those years had taken. By the time I finished my degree and started my career, you were already Ethan Wright, tech pioneer. Your face was on magazine covers. You were dating models and entrepreneurs. A small, self-deprecating smile touched her lips. What would you have wanted with a worn-out librarian carrying student loan debt and emotional baggage? Everything, Ethan said simply. I would have wanted everything you were willing to give. Sophie turned to him, vulnerability visible in her eyes. And now, with all the complications, the different worlds, your CFO's disapproval, now I want the chance to see if what we once had can grow into something new, something that honors who we've become, not just who we were. He took her hand gently. I'm not asking for promises or commitments. Just opportunity. The chance to discover if there's still a path forward for us. Sophie looked down at their joined hands, then back up at him. Marcus won't be the only obstacle. Your board, your investors, they expect a certain type of partner for someone in your position. Someone who enhances your corporate image, who moves comfortably in wealthy circles. Let me worry about that, Ethan said. The question is, are you willing to try? To see if we can bridge these different worlds? The moment stretched between them, fragile with possibility. Then Sophie squeezed his hand, a decision visibly forming in her eyes. Yes, she said softly. I think I am. What neither of them could see, as they stood on that bridge contemplating new beginnings, was the figure watching from a discreet distance, Marcus Jensen, observing their growing closeness with calculated assessment. In his hand, he held his phone, a message drafted but not yet sent to the Wright Innovations board members, outlining his concerns about their CEO's judgment and focus at this critical juncture. Marcus watched Ethan lean closer to Sophie, their silhouettes merging against the backdrop of city lights. His finger hovered over the send button, hesitation battling with his conviction that he was protecting everything they had built together. After a moment, he pocketed the phone without sending the message, but his expression remained troubled as he turned and walked away into the night. The reconciliation between Ethan and Sophie had begun, but the challenges to their reconnection were far from over. Forces beyond their control were already moving, preparing to test not only their fledgling relationship, but the very foundations of the separate worlds they had built during their years apart. The next 2 weeks unfolded in a delicate balance as Ethan and Sophie carefully navigated the beginning of their reconnection. They met for coffee between Sophie's community programs and Ethan's board meetings, shared quiet dinners at neighborhood restaurants away from the spotlight, and spent a rain-soaked Sunday morning exploring Pike Place Market like any ordinary couple discovering their city together. For Ethan, these simple moments revealed a world he had forgotten existed, one where his value came not from his business acumen or wealth, but from the conversation he contributed, the laughter he shared, the genuine connection forming between them once again. With Sophie, he was simply Ethan, not the tech visionary, not the billionaire CEO, just a man rediscovering parts of himself long overshadowed by ambition and achievement. Sophie, too, was changing, allowing herself to imagine possibilities beyond the carefully contained life she had built. The walls erected during years of caregiving and subsequent self-protection began to lower, revealing the passionate, hopeful woman who had once dreamed alongside a scholarship student under starlit skies. But as they grew closer, the separate demands of their worlds intensified. At Wright Innovations, the launch of their revolutionary AI integration platform approached, requiring Ethan's increasing attention. Meetings ran later. International calls filled his early mornings, and Marcus ensured his calendar remained packed with essential decision points that couldn't be delegated. Meanwhile, Sophie faced her own professional challenges. Budget cuts threatened the very literacy programs she had championed, requiring grant applications, community organizing, and long hours strategizing with her team to maintain services. The quiet intensity she brought to fighting for these programs reminded Ethan of why he had fallen in love with her in college, her unwavering commitment to making a difference, however modest the scale might seem to others. Through it all, they carved out moments together, building bridges between their worlds, one conversation, one shared experience at a time. Yet neither could ignore the practical realities that separated them, or the growing resistance from those with vested interests in maintaining that separation. On a particularly hectic Tuesday morning, Ethan sat in his office reviewing final specifications for the AI platform launch when his executive assistant Diana entered, her expression unusually hesitant. "Mr. Wright, the board has called an emergency meeting. They're gathering now in the main conference room." Ethan frowned, checking his schedule. "There's nothing on my calendar." "I know, sir. They requested the meeting without informing me." Diana's discomfort was evident. "Mr. Jensen is already with them." A cold certainty settled in Ethan's stomach. The board meeting without notifying him first, Marcus already present. This wasn't standard procedure. This was something else entirely. "Thank you, Diana. I'll head there now." The main conference room fell silent as Ethan entered. 12 board members seated around the polished table, Marcus standing at the head with a presentation displayed on the wall screen. The slide currently showing contained a graph with Wright Innovations' stock performance over the past month, a troubling downward trend highlighted in red. "Gentlemen, ladies, Ethan greeted them with calm authority, taking his seat at the head of the table opposite Marcus. "I understand this is an emergency meeting." "What's the emergency?" Aldrich Peterson, the senior board member and an early investor in Wright Innovations, cleared his throat. "Ethan, we have concerns about recent developments affecting company performance and public perception. Specifically," Marcus tapped his tablet, advancing to the next slide. "A collection of financial news headlines. Wright Innovations CEO? Distracted? Focus questions as AI launch approaches. Insiders worry as Wright spotted with unknown woman." "These began appearing in industry publications last week," Marcus explained. "Our stock has dropped 12% in response, and several major clients have called expressing concerns about the stability of leadership ahead of the platform launch." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And who leaked my personal life to these publications?" An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Marcus continued. "The source is irrelevant. What matters is the impact on shareholder value and market confidence." "I disagree," Ethan countered evenly. "The source is highly relevant if someone in this room is deliberately undermining the company by feeding speculation to the press." Board member Eliza Chen, one of the few women present, spoke up. "Ethan, no one is suggesting impropriety. We're simply concerned about timing and optics. With the most significant product launch in our history 3 weeks away, any perception of distraction at the top creates market uncertainty. My personal life has no bearing on my commitment to this company or the platform launch," Ethan stated firmly. "The technical specifications are finalized, the marketing strategy approved, partnerships secured. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned." "Except the share price," Marcus interjected, highlighting the downward trajectory again. "And the growing questions from industry analysts about whether your personal situation indicates deeper problems within the organization." The implication was clear. Sophie was being positioned as a liability, a distraction that threatened everything Ethan had built. The familiar argument echoed what Sophie herself had once believed, that her presence in his life would derail his potential, that their worlds were fundamentally incompatible. Ethan stood, moving to the front of the room beside the projected image. With deliberate calm, he switched off the presentation. "Let me be absolutely clear," he said, his voice quiet but commanding. "My personal life is my own. It does not affect my leadership of this company or my commitment to our mission. If stock analysts are creating narratives based on whom I choose to spend time with, that reflects more on the absurdity of market speculation than on any actual business fundamentals." He looked each board member in the eye before continuing. "Wright Innovations is stronger than ever. Our technology is years ahead of competitors. Our financials are sound. This temporary stock fluctuation is based on gossip, not substantive concerns." "With respect, Ethan," Marcus interjected, "perception becomes reality in the market. We've worked too hard, come too far, to risk everything on a personal indulgence." Something in the dismissive way Marcus characterized his relationship with Sophie ignited a slow-burning anger in Ethan. For 15 years, he had sacrificed personal connection for professional achievement. He had built an empire of innovation while his private life remained empty, defined by superficial relationships that fulfilled public expectations without touching his heart. "Sophie Bennett is not a personal indulgence," Ethan replied, his voice cooling to the tone he reserved for adversarial negotiations. "She is someone I care deeply about. Someone whose integrity and commitment to improving lives rivals anything I've seen in corporate boardrooms." He turned to address the entire board. "I've given 15 years of my life to building this company, 60-hour weeks, missed holidays, relationships sacrificed for the next product cycle, the next funding round, the next market expansion. I've delivered consistent growth, technological breakthroughs, and shareholder value beyond what any of you projected when you first invested." The board members shifted uncomfortably under his steady gaze. "In return, I expect the courtesy of conducting my personal life without interference or manipulation. I expect that when unfounded rumors affect our stock price, this board will respond with facts about our strong market position, not by suggesting I end a relationship to appease Wall Street speculators." Peterson cleared his throat again. "No one is suggesting." "Aren't you?" Ethan interrupted, unusual for his typically measured approach. "Let's be honest about what this meeting represents. It's not about the company's performance, which remains exceptional. It's about controlling me, ensuring I remain the singular, work-focused entity who prioritizes Wright Innovations above all else, including personal happiness. Silence fell across the room as the truth of his words registered. These were smart people, successful in their own right, who had backed Ethan's vision from early days. Most had families, personal lives they valued alongside professional achievement. They recognized the fundamental unfairness of what was being asked of him. Liza Chen was the first to speak. Ethan's right. We're overreacting to market noise. The fundamentals remain strong, and the platform launch will silence critics. I move we dismiss these concerns and focus on supporting the launch strategy instead. Gradually, heads nodded around the table. Even Peterson, though reluctant, conceded. Perhaps we've allowed temporary market jitters to distract us from the bigger picture. Ethan has earned our trust. If he says his personal situation won't impact the launch, we should take him at his word. Only Marcus remained visibly dissatisfied, his expression tightly controlled as the meeting shifted to legitimate business matters. When the board adjourned an hour later, he lingered behind, waiting until the last member had left before approaching Ethan. "You're making a mistake," he said without preamble. "I've watched you build something extraordinary through single-minded focus and discipline. Now you're risking it all for..." "For what, Marcus?" Ethan challenged. "For the chance at genuine connection? For something real beyond quarterly reports and product cycles? For a woman who abandoned you once and will do it again when she realizes she doesn't belong in your world." Marcus's voice hardened. "I've protected your interests, your legacy, for over a decade. I know what it takes to succeed at this level." "You know what it takes to build a successful company," Ethan corrected. "But a successful life? That requires more than stock options and market share." Marcus's expression revealed genuine concern beneath his corporate exterior. "I'm trying to protect you, Ethan. From distraction, from disappointment, from watching everything you've built crumble because you took your eye off the ball at a critical moment." "I appreciate the intention," Ethan said, his voice softening. "But I don't need protection from Sophie. What I need is support in finding balance, in building a life that includes both professional achievement and personal fulfillment." Marcus sighed, recognizing the unmovable determination in his friend and CEO. "I hope you're right about her, for your sake and for the company's." After Marcus left, Ethan stood at his office window, watching Seattle's skyline shimmer in the afternoon sun. The board meeting had crystallized something he'd been feeling since reconnecting with Sophie, the emptiness at the center of his achievement, the hollow space where meaning should reside. He pulled out his phone and texted Sophie, "Dinner tonight? Need to see you." Her response came quickly, "Can't tonight. Crisis at the library. Major grant fell through. Scrambling to save programming. Rain check?" The glimpse into her world, so different from the corporate drama he'd just navigated, brought a smile to Ethan's face. "Of course. Can I help?" 3 dots appeared as she typed. Then, "Unless you can conjure $75,000 for children's literacy programs by tomorrow, probably not. But thanks for offering." Ethan stared at the number. $75,000. A rounding error in Wright Innovations' quarterly budget. Coffee money for the executive team, yet a transformative sum for Sophie's programs. The disparity between their worlds had never been more stark, or the opportunity to bridge them more clear. He called her instead of texting back. When she answered, her voice tight with stress, he said simply, "I can help with the grant. No strings, no publicity. Just support for programs that matter." Silence on the line then. "Ethan, I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. I'm offering. Not as a grand gesture, not to impress you. Because I believe in the work you're doing." More silence. Then a deep breath. "This isn't how I wanted this to work. Me needing financial rescue. You providing it. It reinforces every concern I've had about the imbalance between us." "Is that how you see it?" Ethan asked gently. "Because from where I stand, this looks like an opportunity to connect our worlds in a meaningful way. My resources supporting your vision, partnership, not rescue." He could almost hear her thinking, wrestling with pride and practicality, with the complex emotions of accepting help from someone whose resources so dramatically outstripped her own. The programs support over 300 children across Seattle's most underserved neighborhoods, she finally said. Without the funding, they'll end next month. Then let's not let that happen, Ethan replied. Send me the details, and I'll have the transfer arranged by morning. Thank you, Sophie said softly. But we need to talk about this, about what it means for us, about the complications of financial disparities in relationships. Absolutely. Dinner tomorrow? Tomorrow, she agreed. After they hung up, Ethan sat at his desk, contemplating the intersection of their worlds now taking shape. Sophie's initial resistance wasn't surprising. Her fierce independence had always been core to her character, hardened further by years of self-reliance. Accepting his help, even for her programs rather than herself, represented a significant step toward genuine partnership. The following evening, Ethan chose a quiet neighborhood restaurant for their dinner. Upscale enough for privacy, but not so exclusive that Sophie would feel out of place. She arrived looking both tired and relieved, the crisis averted but its emotional toll still evident. The transfer went through, she said as they settled at a corner table. The programs are safe for another year. I'm glad, Ethan replied simply. Sophie studied him across the table, her expression complex. But now we need to talk about what this means, about power dynamics and independence, and all the complications that come when one person in a relationship can solve problems by writing checks. We do, Ethan agreed. And I want to start by saying something important. Helping with the grant doesn't give me any claim on you, any expectations, any power over your decisions. It was simply the right thing to do for programs that matter. It's not that simple, Sophie countered. Money is never neutral. It creates obligations, expectations, imbalances, even when no one intends it to. Then let's acknowledge that reality and figure out how to navigate it together, Ethan suggested. Because the alternative, pretending I don't have resources that could support causes you believe in, seems artificial. Sophie sighed, a small smile finally softening her features. When did you get so wise about relationships? Probably around the time I realized I'd spent 15 years building a technological empire while neglecting what actually makes life meaningful, he admitted. Losing you taught me something important, Sophie. Something I'm only now fully understanding. What's that? She asked quietly. That success, without someone to share it with, is just achievement, not happiness. That all the innovation, all the market share, all the billions don't matter if there's no one waiting at the end of the day who knows the real you, not the CEO, not the tech visionary, just the person underneath it all. Sophie reached across the table, taking his hand in a gesture that felt both new and familiar. The real you is pretty remarkable, Ethan Wright. The boy I fell in love with has become a man of substance, not because of what you've built, but because of how you think, how you care, how you see the world and your place in it. Something shifted between them in that moment, a deeper recognition, a more authentic connection than they had managed since finding each other again. The practical challenges remained, their different worlds, the external pressures, the complex power dynamics. But beneath those surface complications lay something solid and true, two people who saw each other clearly and valued what they saw. So where do we go from here? Ethan asked. How do we build something real while respecting both our worlds? Carefully, Sophie replied with a gentle squeeze of his hand. Honestly, with clear boundaries and open communication. And maybe, she hesitated, then continued with newfound confidence, maybe by recognizing that our different worlds aren't liabilities but strengths. That we each bring valuable perspective the other might be missing. Ethan smiled, recognizing the wisdom in her approach. Partners in the truest sense. Partners? Sophie echoed, the word carrying weight and possibility. Now, tell me about the board meeting. You mentioned there was an emergency. Ethan hesitated, reluctant to burden her with the corporate politics surrounding their relationship. But partnership required honesty, even about uncomfortable truths. The board is concerned that my personal life, specifically my relationship with you, is distracting from the upcoming platform launch. There have been some speculative articles in the financial press, and our stock price has taken a hit. Sophie withdrew her hand, her expression closing. So I'm officially bad for business. No, Ethan said firmly. Short-term market speculation is bad for business. You are good for me, and ultimately, what's good for me is good for the company, even if some board members can't see that yet. What did you tell them? The truth, that my personal life is my own, that the company is on solid ground, and that 15 years of sacrifice and success have earned me the right to pursue happiness without interference. Sophie looked surprised, then thoughtful. That must have gone over well. Ethan smiled. Actually, most of them agreed once I laid it out directly. They're reasonable people who understand that sustainable leadership requires personal fulfillment, not just professional success. And Marcus? Marcus is coming around. Slowly. Ethan didn't mention his CFO's continued resistance or his parting warning. Some battles were his to fight alone. Their conversation shifted to lighter topics. The children Sophie worked with, the technological breakthroughs Ethan was most proud of, memories from their college days that now carried the bittersweet flavor of time lost and potentially reclaimed. By the time they finished dinner, the earlier tension had dissolved into comfortable connection. Outside the restaurant, the Seattle night was unusually clear, stars visible despite the city lights. Ethan looked up, remembering their long-ago conversation about sharing the same sky. "Would you like to walk for a while?" he asked. "It's too beautiful a night to end so soon." Sophie nodded, falling into step beside him as they strolled through the quiet neighborhood. The comfortable silence between them spoke of growing ease, of walls gradually lowering. "I've been thinking about what you said, about money creating complications," Ethan said after a while. "You're right, of course. But I wonder if there's a way to use those resources as a strength in our relationship, not a source of imbalance." Sophie glanced at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "The Wright Foundation," Ethan explained. "It exists mainly on paper now. A vehicle for corporate philanthropy that looks good in annual reports, but lacks real vision or impact. What if we reimagined it together? Your expertise in community needs, literacy, public service combined with the Foundation's resources." Sophie stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "You'd trust me with that?" "I can't think of anyone I'd trust more," Ethan said simply. "You understand what communities actually need in a way that corporate philanthropy often misses. You see people, not statistics. Impact, not tax advantages." The suggestion hung between them, a potential bridge between their worlds that honored both. Sophie's expertise and passion given the resources to create broader impact, while Ethan's wealth found more meaningful purpose than abstract corporate giving. "It's an interesting idea," Sophie said carefully, "but wouldn't your board see that as further entanglement? Further distraction?" "Possibly," Ethan admitted, "but it would also demonstrate that our connection creates value rather than diminishing it, that together we can accomplish something greater than either of us could alone." Sophie resumed walking, processing the suggestion. "I'd need to maintain my independence, my identity separate from you and your company. I can't become an appendage to the Wright empire." "Absolutely," Ethan agreed. "Your leadership at the library, your standing in the community, those are essential to who you are. The foundation would be a parallel opportunity, not a replacement." They had reached a small neighborhood park, empty at this hour, except for the occasional dog walker. They sat on a bench beneath a street lamp, the night air cool but not uncomfortable. "We're really trying to do this, aren't we?" Sophie said, a hint of wonder in her voice. "Build something between our separate worlds." "We are," Ethan confirmed. "Does that scare you?" Sophie considered the question honestly. "Yes, but not as much as the thought of walking away from this second chance." Ethan took her hand, interlacing their fingers in a gesture that felt both protective and seeking protection. "Whatever challenges come, Marcus, the board, market speculation, our own doubts, we'll face them together. Partners." Sophie leaned against his shoulder, the simple contact conveying trust developing between them. "Partners," she echoed. As they sat together under the starlit sky, neither could know that the greatest challenge to their reconnection was already in motion, a challenge that would test not just their commitment to each other, but the very foundations of trust they were carefully rebuilding. Across town, in the Wright Innovations headquarters, a late-night security guard was making his rounds when he noticed light coming from Marcus Jensen's office. The CFO was hunched over his computer, his expression grim as he reviewed documents labeled Bennett Financial Analysis and Strategic Response Options. On his screen, a drafted press release announced a major restructuring of Wright Innovations' leadership team, a restructuring that positioned Marcus to assume greater control while limiting Ethan's autonomy. The pieces were being moved into place for a corporate chess game that would force both Ethan and Sophie to decide what they valued most, the worlds they had built separately, or the possibility of building something new together. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.